Some mistakes force you to rearrange your schedule, but others? They turn your whole life upside down. The usual morning rush was nothing short of chaos. Emails were flooding in, meetings were stacking up, and at least 100 different problems were demanding his attention, all before he had even taken his second sip of coffee. Nathan Cole, Billionaire CEO and an utterly exhausted single father, had barely managed to get any sleep the night before. His company was teetering on the edge of a major merger, and as if that wasn't enough stress, his 3-year-old daughter, Lily, had chosen this particular day to stage a full-scale rebellion. Her cause? A passionate refusal to wear shoes. There was no time to argue. Barely thinking, he scooped her up, fastened her into the car seat, and jumped behind the wheel. His Bluetooth earpiece blinked insistently as his assistant's voice crackled through. "Mr. Cole, the investors are expecting." "I know, Olivia," Nathan cut in, his eyes flicking to the clock on the dashboard. Late. Again. He sped through the familiar streets and pulled into the daycare parking lot. The drop-off was a blur. His mind was already deep in the numbers, running strategies, solving problems. "Be good, sweetheart," he murmured distractedly, pressing a quick kiss to Lily's forehead before handing her off to a smiling daycare worker. And just like that, he was gone. 3 hours later, in the middle of a high-stakes conference call, his phone vibrated on the table. An unfamiliar number flashed on the screen. His first instinct was to ignore it until he caught sight of the message preview. "Mr. Cole, this is Miss Harper from Bright Futures Daycare. We need to talk about Lily." His stomach plummeted. Bright Futures? That wasn't her daycare. Ice flooded his veins. His entire world, his little girl, was in the hands of a complete stranger. Nathan didn't hesitate. His keys were in his grip before he even registered standing up. His assistant's voice chased after him as he stormed toward the door. "Sir, what about your meetings? Cancel them. All of them." But he was already gone. The drive was a breathless blur. Red lights that refused to turn green fast enough. Cars honking in frustration as he weaved through traffic. His mind spiraled into worst-case scenarios. What if they called the cops? What if Lily was scared? What if? He refused to finish the thought. By the time he screeched into the Bright Futures parking lot, his heart was pounding. He didn't even wait for the engine to stop before throwing open the door and bolting inside. And then he froze. A soft giggle floated through the air, stopping him in his tracks. Right there, in the middle of the playroom, Lily sat on a tiny chair, completely at ease. Her bright eyes shone as she giggled, chocolate smeared across her nose. And kneeling beside her, dabbing at the mess with a napkin, was a woman with warm brown eyes and a paint-splattered apron. Nathan exhaled sharply, his chest loosening from the unbearable panic that had gripped it moments before. The woman looked up and met his gaze. For a heartbeat, everything else faded. "Mr. Cole?" she asked, standing up. He swallowed hard and gave a stiff nod, trying to pull himself together. "You must be Miss Harper." She smiled, a touch of amusement in her expression. "I take it you just realized you dropped your daughter off at the wrong daycare?" Running a hand through his already messy hair, Nathan let out a rough chuckle. "Yeah, that would be me, world's most distracted father." Miss Harper laughed softly. "Well, if it makes you feel any better." She didn't seem to mind. "She's been very busy making some rather important business deals in our pretend bakery all morning." Nathan turned to Lily, who beamed up at him proudly, holding out a tiny plastic cupcake. "I made muffins, Daddy." Miss Harper helped. Nathan let out a breathless laugh, shaking his head in disbelief. "That sounds about right." Miss Harper tilted her head, studying him. "You seem surprised." He hesitated before answering. "She's usually shy. It takes her a while to warm up to new people." Miss Harper's smile softened. "Not today." Nathan glanced between his daughter and the woman who, in just a few hours, had somehow managed to make Lily feel completely at ease. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about work. And for the first time ever, he wasn't sure this had been a mistake at all. Crouching beside Lily, he brushed a stray curl from her face. "You okay, sweetheart?" She nodded eagerly. "Daddy, I made muffins. And I sold them." She proudly pointed to the tiny tray of pretend pastries. Miss Harper bought one. Miss Harper wiped her hands on her apron, grinning. She's a natural entrepreneur. Tried to charge me $5 imaginary for a cupcake. Nathan chuckled. She drives a hard bargain. Miss Harper crossed her arms, amusement flickering in her eyes. She said she learned it from her dad. Nathan blinked, caught off guard. He turned back to Lily, who grinned up at him. Daddy always says, know your worth. Miss Harper laughed, shaking her head. Well, she's definitely got confidence. Nathan exhaled, still trying to process everything. He had walked in expecting tears, panic, maybe even a police report. Instead, he found something he hadn't expected at all. Traumatized. That's what he had expected. A 3-year-old, terrified of being left with strangers. But instead, Lily looked happier than she had in weeks. Miss Harper studied him for a moment before lowering her voice. She's a bright kid, Mr. Cole, but she talks a lot about how busy you are. Nathan's smile faltered. Guilt pricked at him. I try to balance it, he admitted, running a hand through his hair. Running a company and raising a kid alone isn't exactly easy. Her expression softened. It doesn't have to be that hard. Something about the way she said it made his chest tighten. There was no judgment in her tone. Just understanding. Lily tugged on his sleeve. Can we come back tomorrow, Daddy? Nathan hesitated. She already had a daycare. A high-end, expensive one. One he had chosen because it was supposed to be the best. But was it? He looked at his daughter, her wide, hopeful eyes, then at Miss Harper, the woman who had somehow made her feel safe and at home in mere hours. Nathan exhaled. Yes, sweetheart, he said, a small smile tugging at his lips. I think we can. Miss Harper raised an eyebrow. Are you saying you're switching daycares because of a scheduling mistake? Nathan met her gaze, something unreadable flickering in his eyes. Let's just say not all mistakes are bad ones. Miss Harper tilted her head, and a slow smile spread across her face. And for the first time in years, Nathan felt something he hadn't in a long, long time, like maybe, just maybe, he had been exactly where he was supposed to be. Miss Harper studied him carefully, her expression thoughtful. Well, in that case, she said, wiping her hands on her apron. Welcome to Bright Futures, Mr. Cole. Nathan smirked. Call me Nathan. She hesitated for a beat, then nodded. All right, Nathan. Lily clapped excitedly. Yeah. Now Miss Harper can be my teacher forever. Miss Harper chuckled. Let's start with a few days a week, kiddo. Nathan glanced around the room. The colorful walls, the cozy reading corner, the kids playing freely without rigid schedules or pressure. It was nothing like the sleek, corporate daycare he had chosen before. It felt better. He exhaled. I'll have my assistant handle the paperwork, but I'd also like to make a donation to the center. Miss Harper's brows lifted. That's generous. Nathan shrugged. Let's just say I owe you for making sure my daughter didn't end up traumatized because her dad dropped her off at the wrong place. Miss Harper smirked. You're lucky it was here and not the auto shop across the street. Nathan laughed, actually laughed for the first time in what felt like forever. Lily tugged on his sleeve again. Daddy, can we get ice cream? Nathan opened his mouth, ready to say he had meetings, emails, things to do. But then he saw the way she looked up at him, full of innocent hope. And just like that, for the first time in a long time, work didn't feel like the most important thing. He smiled. Yeah, kiddo. Let's get ice cream. Miss Harper turned back to the other kids, but as Nathan lifted Lily into his arms, he found himself hesitating. He glanced back. Miss Harper. She looked over her shoulder. Yeah. Nathan hesitated for just a second before smirking. You like ice cream? She blinked, then smiled knowingly. Depends. Who's paying? Nathan chuckled. Take a wild guess. Miss Harper crossed her arms, pretending to consider it. Then, finally she grinned. All right, Mr. Cole, I mean Nathan. You've got yourself a deal. Lily squealed with excitement. And Nathan, he felt something shift inside him. Something light. Something unexpected. Maybe mistakes weren't just accidents. Maybe, sometimes, they were fate. Some moments change your plans. Others? They change your life. The real question is, do you recognize them when they happen?